Hi, y'all, and welcome to tonight's live stream. We have waited 7 years for this moment in an act of bravery that not many adults could ever hope to achieve. 14-year-old Liberty German filmed her own abduction, hoping somebody would catch this creep. And within hours, she and her best friend, Abigail Williams, age 13, would be found brutally murdered within the park where they had gone for a walk in a secluded area in the park. Now, Richard Allen is accused of this heinous crime. He says he's not the guy. The access to this trial is incredibly limited. The only way to find out what is happening in the courtroom is from somebody who's actually physically present sitting in the courtroom. There are no computers, there are no cell phones, there's no tweeting. So it's old-fashioned pen and paper, it's old-fashioned notepads. And if you want significant legal analysis of what's going on, your only choice is to turn to YouTube and to people who are actually present in the courtroom. The defendant has been barred from presenting all of his most critical evidence, and we absolutely need boots on the ground and eyes in this courtroom. And that's why I have traveled hundreds of miles to be here present during the trial. Now, just hearing that a 13-year-old and a 14-year-old were killed is enough to make anybody incensed. And then seeing the crime scene photos would make anyone just absolutely enraged. They're just horrific. But I will tell you, what we saw today outraged me in a completely different way because it was so brave and it was so courageous. And what we saw Liberty German do, I mean, hats off. She's worth 100,000 of whoever killed her easily. So today what I want to do is take you through the day at trial, give you some analysis as we go, and I'm going to then tell you, now naturally, of course, I can't show you the video. I'm going to show you the short clip that law enforcement gave us before trial. I'm going to show you that, and then I'm going to show you, and then I'm going to describe to you the much longer version that we saw today. It was packed with surprises, things that were not expected, just all the way around, not at all what I thought we were going to see. But I think it had some really important lessons and some really important things that it will tell us. And through this, we're going to talk about law enforcement witnesses who set up the introduction of this video evidence. And we're also going to talk about some witnesses who were in the park that day. And boy, I tell you what, if Richard Allen had not put himself at the crime scene, these state witnesses sure could not have done it. And that testimony, all of that testimony was just a jumble, a real mess. So special shout out to the first 5 in the chat, L. Jane and Missy R, Rita Young, Jeff Nunnally, and Desert Rose. Really great to see you. Thank you for being here. I also want to give a special shout out to Sally and Bill Creel. I really appreciate your watching. I've been meeting a ton of people. Just a few people I'm going to shout out are Lena and Mike, Deborah from Dateline, and Gail, who has been my line buddy. All right, so let's get started talking about what happened today at trial. And one thing I want you to notice, I had noticed these mysterious things up on either side of the judge's bench, wrapped in kind of black plastic trash bags, but they're not that big, maybe that big, something like that, but wrapped tightly in these black plastic, like a trash bag. And I asked somebody in the courtroom, what are those? Guess what they are? They are cameras that could be used to film this trial, but that are not being used to film the trial. There are 2 in the front and 1 in the rear of the courtroom, but they're not being used, and the trial is not being filmed. Not even the audio is being released to the public during the trial. So, we've actually been 3 days now into the trial, and I don't think there's been a single mention of Richard Allen. To this point, what the law enforcement is doing is just setting up what happened to Libby and to Abby that day in the park. They've taken us through the crime scene photographs, and today we went through a lot more evidence. So we started with Ryan O'Leahy, who was back on the stand, And he identified a bunch of items that were found in the creek. There were items of clothing and so forth that were at the scene, but Libby was not wearing any clothing, and Abby was wearing a mixture of her clothes and Libby's clothes. And then a bunch of Libby's clothes were found down in the creek. So to kind of list those for you, Libby's Nike shoes, blue jeans, waist 26. The reason that's important is that was probably Abby's. That's why they mentioned the waist. And the clothes, the jeans or pants that Abby was wearing, I think they were jeans, were probably Libby's. They didn't fit her. They were the wrong size. There was also a tie-dye shirt, extra large, a gray hooded sweatshirt, underwear, black and purple sock, pink sock, headscarf, and a black faded glory shirt, large. All of that came from the creek. And then from the scene, because they cataloged all the physical evidence that they collected there at the scene, Converse tennis shoe, right and left, that were on Abigail Williams. She was actually wearing those. Libby was barefoot. She was completely unclothed. A 40 caliber Smith & Wesson cartridge. That is ultimately important because law enforcement says they can trace that unspent cartridge back to a gun they actually found in the home of Richard Allen. They say they can connect the two. And then stranded material. There was a good bit of it, and we don't really know exactly what that is or whether we know there is a new hair that's being analyzed that had not been analyzed before. Although it seemed like that might be something dramatic, it also now appears that it actually came from a relative of Libby's, a female relative, perhaps her grandmother with whom she lived or her sister who had just loaned her shirt for that day. So at this point, there was also, though, we found out stranded material from the right hand of Abigail, from the left arm of Abigail. And would that be, no, there's some more. We'll find some more through this. I'll keep reading. There's going to be more. Anyway, they took a bunch of swabs from the inside of Libby's left wrist and right wrist, from her belly button or belly, I'm not sure which, the thigh above the knee. Here we go. Some more fibrous material from the pinky finger of the left hand of Libby. Now, why are these hairs and fibers so important? Because one thing that law enforcement looks for is if there's been a scene where someone's been murdered, there may have been a scuffle. There may have been some kind of fight between the victim trying to get away or trying to push the person away. And if so, there may be hair, there may be DNA that would be underneath, say, the fingernails. By the way, there were no swabs taken under the fingernails, and there were no fingernail clippings that were listed in the items that they talked about. So they may have just missed that opportunity. They had swab of the thigh. I think I may have said that. Sorry. Blood stain on a tree 4 feet above ground level. That's really important in this case. The defense says there was a rune painted on a tree. We'll just briefly get into that. There is a significant, wild, and possibly meritorious claim that the defense wants to make, but that the judge has not allowed them to make. The defense says that the things that happened here at the scene were done by Odinists as part of a religious ritual, that there were sticks laid on the girls, and I will say it was bizarre looking. And those sticks were in a pattern that they say mimicked runes. In addition, they say that blood from Libby had been painted on a tree in the shape of something like a letter F that is also a rune coming from a Norse religion. But all of that is out. What is in is that there was blood on the tree. There was reference to it as the F tree or the F, there was some other word they used there. That sounds strange, doesn't it? The F tree. But I think it was something along those lines. And the tree, according to the prosecution, they're going to argue that that blood on there was something from hands, that her hands touched the tree. The blood, however, we do know was on the opposite side of the tree. So I guess she would have had to have her arms around it, Libby specifically. All right, swabs there were blood stains around the girls in various places, and they swabbed those. There was a black Nike tennis shoe underneath Abby's body, a mate to the one that was found in the creek. Both of them belonged to Libby. There was a swab from all kinds of swabs from the ground, and also for the between the tree, not just on the tree, but like at the foot of the tree. A red stain below the head of Abigail, a swab from more swabs from the tree, from the left index finger and left pinky finger of Libby, and from the cell phone of Libby. Underneath Abby's body were found not just the shoe, but also the cell phone of Libby. And so they swabbed that as well. There was one of the things the prosecution has done extremely well in this case is respond. One of the things that the jury asked, and they're allowed to ask questions here after a witness finishes testifying. And one of the things they asked about suggested maybe they were concerned about chain of custody. Were they getting the real scoop on, is this real evidence and have you preserved it? Are we seeing the final real evidence? So the prosecution has expanded the amount to which they go into detail and talk about exactly how the evidence was collected and how it was packaged and how it was preserved. And that's smart because that is directly responding to what the jury has been concerned about. So that's one of the things that they've been doing. There were he also went to the autopsy and collected items there as well. Swabs from the left thigh and right breast and left breast of Libby. They did an SA evidence collection kit for both girls. What we understand the result is going to be, but we haven't had it testified to, is they were negative, that there was no SA against either Libby or Abby. But that evidence has not been presented at trial. That's just something we've heard about, and we'll have to wait and see whether that actually materializes and is true at trial. Trace fiber from the upper left arm of Abigail, a black hooded sweatshirt on Abigail from with the word German on the back. So that was Libby's clothing on Abby. It said Delphi swimming. Of course, she might have borrowed that in advance. Blue jeans, size too big for Abby, with Derek on them. A gray cotton bra with red stains, size 34. And that was a weird thing. Abigail was actually, there were two bras on her bra and then Libby's bra put on top of that, which is, I don't know. I mean, if you can explain that to me, please do. It's just bizarre, just absolutely bizarre. But again, it was very surprising that they didn't swab under the fingernails and that they didn't clip the fingernails. There was no mention of that because that's such a common place that law enforcement looks when there's been an assault to see whether or not there's something there that might be traced back to the perpetrator, DNA, something from touch, hair, skin cells, anything that they could use to trace. So one of the things that was a little frustrating about today is that items were collected. I am very, very tired. I only got a couple hours of sleep. I had to be there at 2:45. One of the issues is that the exhibits were often paper exhibits, and every single juror is getting a copy, and they have a folder that they're putting all of these in and collecting them in. Which is actually a great way to make sure that the jury has all the evidence. But in this particular case, what that means is people in the audience can't see it. So there's no real way to see what the evidence was. A lot of times they'll refer to photographs and then they'll hand them to the jury, but there's none of that actually connects through and is shown to the audience. They went into the issue of the moisture on Abby's clothing. That was one of the things they talked about. The jeans she had on were wet, and they talked about a line that was on the sweatshirt she was wearing, as well as the pink tank top that she was wearing underneath it. Both of them had a line where there was water. Why is that important? It's because the prosecution thinks that Libby and Abby were forced across, that they had crossed an old railroad trestle across a creek, long one, very long. It spanned a 60-foot height, and it went a long way into the woods on either side, that they were forced to go down the hill on one end from the far end from where they had started, and that they were then forced to go across that creek. It was, as the one of the officers said, that it was anywhere from 1 to 2 inches deep and up to 3 feet deep. So that line would be an indication that maybe Abby really was forced across the creek because she had waded in the creek, and that's why she was wet up to a certain line. So I think that's why they're suggesting that. There was also talk about the bullet, the unspent casing that was found there at the crime scene, and that it was a Smith and Wesson. It was a 40 caliber. It was a 40 caliber round, and one of the things that they talked about was that one of the most common weapons is a Smith and Wesson. Now, one problem today with some of the law, and frankly, up until now too, some of the law enforcement witnesses are sort of hostile to the defense. And so they'll object to things that are, you probably shouldn't object to that, So, and I don't mean they literally say objection, but for example, the witness was asked, well, one of the most common weapons in the world is the Smith and Wesson, isn't it? And I mean, that's just true. And the witness said no. Like, oh, come on. It is too. You don't have to win every single point. That particular thing, you could just say sure, and it doesn't mean you've lost your case. They talked about the fact that the reason that they swabbed the wrists of Libby was to see whether there would be some DNA there from the perpetrator, somewhere that wasn't maybe her blood, but maybe where some blood of the perpetrator might be mixed in. Maybe they'd be able to collect something. But as the defense pointed out, there was no connection to Richard Allen. Now, at this point, there was an objection sustained where the prosecution said, look, this is not really the witness to ask if this stuff was DNA connected to Richard Allen. You need to ask the DNA witness. And the judge said, sustained, ask another witness. All right, I have tons and tons of people to thank, and I'm so excited. Thank you. Lisa Williams, Curious ES, Carolina RN, Bethany are all new members. Thank you so much. I'm excited to have you along. Nemesis, I appreciate that very much. And Michael Lalonde has been a member for 6 months. Fantastic. Thank you, Michael. And I'm so glad you're back. He was displaced by the hurricanes. Joe Berard, thank you very much. I appreciate the super sticker. And Marissa Fontaine and and I will get to the others in just a minute. Let's go back to our talk of the day. So let's see, we'll head on to there was talk when in this particular witness, and did I even tell you who the witness was? Now that we're far into what yes, I did, Brian O'Leahy. Okay, so I did mention who the witness was. One of the things he was asked was about a breach of integrity of photos from the investigation. He just said, I don't have any knowledge of that. And I talked yesterday, they had sort of hinted at that from the defense, wanting to say, hey, y'all leaked some photographs. But they are a little at risk there, since there was also an issue related to the defense having photographs on a table and those getting leaked by someone who knew the defense side. And the judge felt like it was something that was directly attributable and that the defense lawyers ought to be punished for. Now, they were reinstated by the Supreme Court. They remain Richard Allen's attorneys, but still, it's a little brave to talk about that. They got nowhere with it since he said he had no knowledge of it. He thought, and this is certainly what I thought initially, when there were sticks on top of Abby and Libby, and he said he thought they were an attempt at concealment. Having seen them, I don't buy that. I don't buy that at all. I mean, I pictured branches from trees with, leaves or ferns, maybe something that was big, leafy, green that would maybe cover up the girls. They were not like this. These were sticks, just sticks that were placed on the girls. It wouldn't do anything to conceal them because there were just, I think, 2 sticks on Libby, 3 on Abby. So it really wouldn't make any sense to put sticks on them to conceal them. So personally, that's just my take. Since I can't show you the pictures. I'm going to try to give you my very best description of what I think about it. He said he did not see any cut sticks or anything like that. One thing I wanted to note, he talked about, Alehi did, about not seeing any significance in the way the sticks were positioned. As you know, the defense claims that these were in the shape of runes, that the way they were placed had meaning, the way they were on top of each other had meaning. But in this particular case, he said he didn't see any significance to that. One of the effects of that is the prosecution is hemming itself in when it comes to the possible prosecution of anybody else. So each time they eliminate one of Richard Allen's arguments that someone else could have been involved, or they address that and push that aside, that then pins that witness down to that particular statement of fact. And then they're stuck. That's what they have to testify to from here on out. Or the lawyer will say, well, didn't you say back then that you thought that these sticks had absolutely no meaning, that there was no significance, no communication? It wasn't a rune. Didn't you say that? He didn't use the word rune, but that's exactly how the cross would go. So let's see. The sweatshirt on Abby was too large for her. The jeans on her were too large for her. The sizing was more consistent with the size of Libby, and and what the witness said was it looked like Libby had disrobed and then her clothes got put on Abigail. Not 100% correlation, because Abigail's clothes were, at least her jeans, were in the creek. So it just was a bizarre situation. He was not able to determine, he said, the location where that exchange of clothing occurred. He couldn't figure it out either. He mentioned one large stick had an indentation, and he thought that it had been moved from near the body. Do you have any idea what that means? If you do, put that in the chat. I wrote it down and just scratched my head over it. I have no idea what he meant by that. There was foot traffic in the area before Alehi got there for his search, and he never really worked or did anything with the shoe impressions that would have been available right there at the scene. The defense obviously wants to point to that to say that this was a shoddy, incomplete investigation, that they fingered Richard Allen without really bothering to see whether other people might have been involved, might have been more responsible. There was no attempt to look for fingerprints at the scene. The F tree, they did call it an F tree. See, I was right about that. It had red staining, and a blood spatter expert was finally hired by the state this year to look at the tree. The defense asked the witness, well, why not hire someone earlier? Why wait so long to hire a blood spatter expert? And he said, well, we had a guy who knew enough about it. And this was, again, an example of the witness really arguing, which I think can make it more difficult for the jury to believe the person, because if they argue too much, it's a lot of times better if a witness just acknowledges a few things where, hey, life isn't perfect. I probably should have done that earlier. All right, I already talked about the water level. He was not able to locate a point where one or more individuals climbed up that north shore. So to set the scene, and I've got a slide here that I can show you. Let's pull one up so we can kind of get a look at what we're talking about. Okay, so you see where the bodies were, and I said last night I was going to move this further down, but I hadn't done it yet. If you see, kind of go toward the middle of that. The blue I did where the creek is, so you could see more easily where Deer Creek is located. The clothing was in the water, but on one side, the south side of the creek. The bodies were on the north side of the creek. And the creek, by the way, just FYI, flows from right to left, from where you see Logan Home over there toward Freedom Bridge. That's the direction of the flow of the creek. So the bodies and the clothing were on opposite sides, although the clothing was in the creek. So it wasn't like it was on the shore. And so one of the things, since the girls were forced down the Monon High Bridge, which you can see in small print there. Oh, I put it in red too, Monon High Bridge, and there's an arrow to it. It's a long bridge. So it spans that creek plus a good bit on either side. The girls were forced down the hill, law enforcement believes, on the south side, which would kind of make sense for where their clothing was found in the creek on the west side. But then their bodies were found on the north side. So the question is, how did that happen? And where did this exchange of clothing happen? Where and how did all of this happen? Right in the middle of a park where, of course, there aren't that many people around, but there are other people around. And the defense has done a good job of getting people to talk about how sound carries in there. And people probably would have heard the girls had they screamed. So how did this happen? How exactly did the clothing get in the creek and the bodies up on the hill? And one of the things that the defense said, well, did you locate a spot where the girls came on the south side? Who knows how the clothing happened? They moved to the north side, and then they had to go up to the spot where the bodies were found. And did you find a spot where one or more individuals climbed up that north shore? And the witness had to say, no, he didn't find that. So I think the defense is going to argue that the girls were taken out by road in a car from underneath the bridge, because a road does run under the bridge right where they were forced down. And I think the witness will say they were taken somewhere, not the witness, the defense, and they were brought back to the Morning Heights Cemetery you see up there, and then probably maybe dead already. I'm not really sure what the argument will be. And then they made their way down that hill to where the bodies are, which, by the way, is extremely steep from what we've heard. Everything on that side between Morning Heights Cemetery and the creek, there are a lot of very steep areas in there. One of the most difficult things for the defense is the fact that unspent casing was found at the scene and matched to Richard Allen's gun. Now, Richard Allen has a number of arguments against it. One he wants to make is that this whole concept that you can match an unspent casing to a particular gun is just nonsense. Now, that witness may or may not be allowed to testify. Judge Gull has it under advisement, and I don't think she's ruled yet. Now, one of the things he also argues is that there isn't really a match. They've made this up. And then a third thing he wants to argue is maybe any match was invented by you, law enforcement. And he wants to do that by suggesting that there aren't enough photographs to show that bullet, that there are some photographs showing it in the ground. There are none showing it taken out of the ground, none showing it in the lab, just results of testing. They may actually have made a little headway on that today, maybe some unexpected headway from a juror question. I think, and I think so did a juror, that the witness who collected the bullets said that they were placed into some kind of tin or box. And the witness today testified that the bullets were in paper. They were inside some paper. So one of the arguments his team may have is that there was a collection of this bullet and somehow a different bullet was put in there. One was in a box, one was in paper. It couldn't have been the same. That may be an argument that his team will have now. I would have to go back to my notes to make sure, but from a juror question, I think they remembered the same thing I did. All right, let's keep going. Oh, and let me make sure that I am keeping up. I'm very grateful for your super stickers. I think you don't even understand how encouraging it is that y'all do that. It just makes me think, oh, good. They're really enjoying this. So this is something they actually want and enjoy. So thank you a ton. Spunky, thank you for the super sticker. And Martha Chandler, thank you so much. Araya Sheridan, appreciate it. And Kathy, thank you, Kathy. And Joby Ream, so appreciative. And look at that. Neurosite Zena has been a member for 4 months. That's great. I'm so glad to have you as a member for that long. Barbie's 2 Bits is saying, grateful for the hardships you endure. This has been just unexpectedly difficult to bring this information to you. I do think it's important, but we also are probably going to end up talking at the end about just some of the things that make it difficult to report on this and some ways that I think I might have to adjust just to make it physically possible to do. All right. There was a situation, as the defense pointed out, where a sock was collected at the scene, and there's a picture of someone holding the sock with their bare hand. Obviously not the greatest crime scene uh, uh, identification and collection technique, right? Because the DNA of the person picking it up might end up on the sock and confuse some issues. So that was one thing the defense pointed out, and that there were no defensive wounds anywhere on Libby's body. And there was there were some questions from the defense earlier about the bodies and whether or not law enforcement had looked at bug activity or feral animal activity. The defense would like to say there is no reason for the prosecution to believe that these bodies were at the scene for a full day, because there was nothing that had happened to the bodies that you might expect to happen over the course of a full day. If they'd been killed in the afternoon on the 13th and found on the 14th, maybe there would have been more problems with the body, like bugs or like feral animals. But in this particular case, it was winter, it was February. So I don't think that argument is kind of gone anywhere, because I think most people think, yeah, you don't really have bugs. And the witness did say that animal activity is attracted by bug activity, which I thought was, I'd never heard of that. I certainly think that feral animals would be attractive regardless of bug activity if they're hungry. But in this particular case, I didn't think it was a super strong argument. And there were a ton of juror questions. Jurors are allowed to ask questions in this case, and these jurors have been very active, and they've been very proactive with making questions that are fact-based, and they're getting important questions in and getting good answers. The first was, did the undergrowth appear to be disrupted under Abby to indicate she was dressed as she lay there? You know, what a great practical question. Yes, that's a good one. He said he didn't recall that. The next question, when evidence was tested at the lab, how is that logged and resealed in the same bag? And they went into detail, as I mentioned earlier, to make sure that the jury understood how exactly evidence is collected, cataloged, and preserved. Next question, is it common practice to change gloves during evidence collection, or for that matter, wear them? And the witness said yes. And was the bullet collected in the envelope or a pill box? And he said an envelope, and it was never removed. Very fascinating, because I remember, like the juror, that I think they said a pill box, but I have to go back to my many notebooks ago. Juror question, final one. What identifies which items were reopened by a lab? And he explained it. So you can see they have a lot of questions around what is the preservation of evidence? What have you done to make sure we're only getting real good, solid evidence that is clean, that's connected to this particular crime scene, so we know we're not getting the wool pulled over our eyes? The next witness, Trooper Brian Bunner, ISP for 20 years, Indiana State Police. He oversees the digital forensics program. He used Celebrite to extract data from Libby's phone, and he got a video. And now I am going to describe to you what we saw in this video. Up until now, in fact, I'm going to start with, let me show you what law enforcement had released. They had released a 4-second clip of first they started with even less than that. They started with a clip of a man. I won't tell you what it says, just in case you haven't heard. I won't predispose you one way or the other. But there was this brief clip, and that gets played. And then they added a little bit more to it, so that there's a little bit more. I'm going to play both. They're just a few seconds. So let's add that to the sound. I'm playing it over and over, looping it. So that's a still shot from Libby's video. And there's a little bit of the clip of video. First, they release the audio. Ooh, that's not very loud. And I can tell you why in just a minute. Okay, so what we heard was the whole video. And I'm going to tell you, it was both more important and less impactful to the case at the same time than I had expected. And I'll just kind of describe to you what I saw and then give you some analysis, because we have been waiting for this video for 7 years. Libby German, one of the most courageous people you could ever meet, filmed this from her own phone, from her own camera. She filmed this as she was being abducted, as the person was coming toward her, and she got just a little bit. What the law enforcement had released was that picture of a man and a little bit of him walking, then a little bit of video. And the reason the audio was so hard to hear and so light on that second one is that's when they first released it, but it had not yet been enhanced. And I will tell you what, it was really difficult to hear. Here's what it looked like to me. It looked like somebody is trying to film without letting the people know that they're trying to film. So it's a lot of this, movement around. It flips up and you can see the bridge really quickly. I could not even catch fast enough, and I was, off to the side, so that could have affected it. But I couldn't even catch that there was a picture of a man there, and there's apparently Abby, and then a man comes up behind her, and Abby comes toward Libby. Now, at that point, I don't know their voices, but there's a high-pitched sort of nervous sounding girlish voice. And the one thing that you could hear clearly on it was some whimpering from a girl. And then there's no path there for me to go to. So that's where they say, law enforcement, I would believe anyway, that the girls were being ordered down the hill. And when you heard that first clip with the audio, with the enhanced audio, it says down the hill. Later, law enforcement released yet another piece that seems to say guys down the hill. But it's the kind of thing that you need to play over and over and loop and play in slow motion. They played it twice now at trial, but you can't just play evidence. You can't just put evidence out over and over again at trial, because that becomes too much of an emphasis on it, and the jury should just accept it for what it is. But I should think if they're given any kind of video equipment back in the jury room, that they would play that over and over and over again. As soon as it's released, I know that's what I want to do, because I want to hear what is said. There was what it looked to me like was that Libby saw what was happening, and she thought, I better film this. And she started filming. You have a lot of, it's up, then it's the ground, then it's around, and it's sort of chaotic. And I think she was trying to do it without making it clear that she was doing it. I'll be honest, it definitely seemed to me like it was possible that there was one person behind her and one person in front of them. One of the things that the defense had said is to the jury, you won't even be sure the words are spoken by Bridge Guy, the guy coming toward them. And given how much it moves around, it's really not possible for that to be. Briefly, the phone pans down and you can see that road below them, where the defense would like to argue that there was a vehicle there that took them away. They may well still argue that. I think he did say even that he thought Libby had gotten into a car, and Libby and Abby had gotten into a car and gone somewhere. But it is a terrifying scene. And even so, you know that Libby had the presence of mind to do something about it, to say, I'm going to catch this guy. He's not getting away with this. I'm going to film him, and people are going to see this. And it makes you want to stand up and shout for Libby. Good for you. I mean, what a person, what character. That just really shows the kind of person she is and how much superior she is to whoever did this to her. Anyway, it was moving for that reason, because you realize, and you could see from the chaotic nature of it, what it must have meant to her to film this and why she did it. You could really see that. You could kind of hear the panic and what I'm guessing is Abby's voice. But when she says there's no path there for me to go to, there had been talk about, one of the girls said there's a gun. I didn't hear that, but there was so much that we couldn't hear. The only audio enhanced part was the down the hill. I had no idea. I asked everyone around me. Most people, several people anyway, even thought that this wasn't the video. There must be another video. That's what I thought at first. I thought, well, this must be just a brief, I don't know how long it was, 15 seconds. Turns out I think it was 40, but it was just a brief video. And then we're going to get the down the hill one because I never heard the words down the hill. In fact, nobody around me did. I mean, literally nobody heard down the hill. They could all hear the girl say something like, there's no path. And the words I got were, there's no path there for me to go to. But everybody heard a little bit of that, but nobody heard the down the hill. If it had not been for the enhanced audio, I don't think those words would have been audible for the jury or for anybody. Let's see if there's anything else. I don't want to leave anything out about that because we have waited for this for absolutely forever. And I do think the most moving part of it was what it says about Libby and her presence of mind and why she was doing this. And you can just see that. And you can actually just see I don't even know how you can do it, but you see the emotion behind why she's doing this. And you see the reason why she's doing this and what it's costing to try to do this without letting anybody know. At the same time, I think it has less value evidentiarily than I had hoped. I mean, I had really hoped there would be maybe a clearer shot. Maybe there would be more of, it would be just something where you could actually tell what was happening and who was doing what. Because of the way it was filmed and because she was afraid, I think, when she filmed it, there wasn't anything like that. But good. I mean, good on her isn't strong enough. I mean, I can't even tell you what it makes me think about Libby. Hat is off to that girl. I tell you what. It has been kind of emotional. I mean, seeing those pictures and stuff. All right. So they also took still shots from the video, which he had enhanced. But they handed those out to the jury, so I did not get to see those. So I can't tell you what was in them. One of their goals was to make Bridge Guy a little clearer. And I don't know if that's the same as what was released to the public or whether these were more enhanced than that. One of the things they did with Libby's phone was kind of odd. They kept doing new extractions. It wasn't 100% clear why. It may have been that Celebrite was releasing new iterations, and so they would get the newest, latest version, and they would try her phone again in case any new data came up. At one point, they even reached out to Homeland Security and had Customs/Homeland Security do an analysis of the phone where they had some licensing or some abilities with Celebrite that the local Indiana State Police would not have. But in this particular case, the witness admitted that every time that happened, there was a little bit of data lost. There was, they went through each time the phone was extracted on February 15th. And then again, February 21st, Homeland Security did it again. Then there was another extraction October 11th, and then another one in 2019. So in each of these instances, there was some data lost, he said. That is true. Each time you plug in or extract data, you lose some. But he also said that doesn't mean, and he reassured the jury, that doesn't mean text messages. That doesn't mean anything that is the kind of stuff you would expect to find on a phone. You're not losing emails. You're not losing text messages. This is underlying data that is being pulled out. He looked at, there was also reference really quickly in cross-examination to the camera roll on Libby's phone having a photograph of Libby's own funeral. Now, I think the meaning behind that would be that the phone was taken, returned to her family, used, and one of the things they did was take a photograph with it at her funeral, and then it was returned to law enforcement. So I think the point was other people have had this phone, family members have had this phone, so we can't really trust the data. But since it had already been searched once before that, I didn't feel like that completely undid it. But we may learn more about that. It was done so quickly that it was a little bit difficult to understand what exactly the defense was trying to suggest. There was also talk in the defense cross-examination about the longitude and latitude being nowhere near the bridge. So what the witness explained was from a video, you can actually get location data. It's not just that you see the bridge. It's also that you can see where the longitude and latitude are. And in this particular case, in Libby's video, you see the bridge. You actually see it briefly as the camera pans up. And apparently, I guess you can also see bridge guy. It was so quick and the angle so bad. I didn't see that. But like I say, that is the video. So I believe it's on there. And longitude and latitude suggested it wasn't near the bridge. Well, we know it was. We could see the bridge in the video. And so the defense is saying, well, maybe this data is unreliable. Maybe we can't really count on it. Another point the defense made was that Find My iPhone was enabled. And they tried to ask, well, isn't Find My iPhone something parents often use to track their children? And that was sustained. The witness was not allowed to answer that. So I think the reason that the defense asked this is to suggest, well, you, the Germans, were out looking for your daughter. Why didn't you just use Find My iPhone? Not only do I think it would be very difficult to make a good argument there, but also I can tell you why. I can guarantee you that in 2017, I had no idea how to use Find My iPhone. Would it have been a great idea? Should I have probably been using it then to track my children? Probably so. But I didn't know how to do that in 2017. And I'm sure that's a pretty clear answer about why the Germans weren't using that. They did call AT&T and ask them to ping Libby's phone. So they were doing all they could to find her. I don't think the fact that they weren't using Find My iPhone means anything other than that they didn't even know it was possible, or they didn't know how to use it if they did know it was possible. All right, so we've been through the data that was lost when the cell is turned on and off. And there were additional coordinates found by another sergeant in 2024, according to a defense question, but this witness didn't know anything about it, so we didn't find out. That'll be interesting. I don't see how they can be anywhere except at the bridge because we see the bridge, but maybe these coordinates will come later when the phone reactivated at 4:33 the next morning and there were text messages downloaded. That would be fascinating if we get any information like that. The juror questions were, what was the February 13th time when the longitude, latitude, in other words, when you got this longitude and latitude data, what time was it? And the answer was 2:13. The next question, what information is on the knowledge seed database? And there have been talk about the knowledge seed being something Apple had installed in its various computers, cell phones, and other devices. And this knowledge seed was not known. People didn't know it was there. So as a result, Celebrite wasn't searching it. It wasn't looking there. Then that became known and Celebrite started to look there. So the witness just said, well, as soon as Celebrite knew about it, they started looking there. All right, more juror questions. Was the report from 1017 from ISP, Indiana State Police, or Homeland Security? Answer, Indiana State Police. Was the knowledge seed database produced by Homeland Security? And they said, we believe it was there in the method 3 extraction that the Homeland Security did. That was a type of extraction. But at that point, nobody knew about this knowledge seed, so nobody knew what they were looking at or for. This is obviously one juror with a whole lot of technical knowledge. So that's going to be a hard thing for the lawyers, because now they know there's somebody on there and they're going to have to figure out how on earth they are going to get this person to follow along. How are they going to give them enough information so they can buy what is being said? Next question, as of 2017, February 2017, were you aware of any deleted photos or videos? Witness said no. And do Snapchat photos save to a person's phone? One of the photographs Libby had taken was a Snapchat photo. And the witness said, well, it could be in the Snapchat database, but I don't really know. So they didn't get a firm final answer on that. Final question, could an iPad associated with iCloud have pulled the location of the part? And the answer, oh, there is one more. So then final question, did you ever photograph the locked stream before you locked it to show notifications since it was last accessed? And he said he didn't think so. Both of those questions were a little bit over my head. So there you have it. And for those of you who know what they're talking about, please put that in the chat for all of us so we can figure out what it was that the juror was talking about. All I can say is that juror knows a lot more about the underlying technology than I do. All right. So Miss Construe has been a member for 6 months. That is awesome. So glad, Miss Construe. And yes, I do. I am really wanting to go to bed tonight. All right. Megan O'Leary, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Christy, thank you. Christy A. Painter's daughter. Vicky Smith is a new member. Kate's Meow, thank you so much. And Bethany, has anyone asked to borrow my notes? Yes, I've loaned my notes out. We also sit back there. I'll be like, did you get this? You know, this, I'll draw a little circle over here. That means ask somebody else. And they'll ask me, did you get this? What time was that? What was the word he said here? So there's a lot of camaraderie and sharing. I think there is widely perceived need to get this information out to the public. And I think most of the people there really feel like this is a service that's being offered, that we really want to be able to provide this to you so that you have the chance to know what's happening, so that this is a public trial despite the difficulties, and they are many. All right. So now, after lunch was a little quicker. We went through a bunch of witnesses. I mean, it wasn't quicker in time, but it was quicker in terms of, I think there's less we have to go over. I'm trying to give you a full and complete, yet brief overview of the day. So where did Bethany, thank you so much. And wow, y'all are overwhelming me. Thank you so much. Joanne, thank you. I appreciate it. And Jenny, thank you, Jenny. And anyone. That's a great name. Robert Elliott, thank you for the super sticker. And Kathy, thank you very much. I have many people. I'm going to dive back in because I don't want everybody to get bored as I look at this, but I just want to tell you how much I appreciate each and every one of you. All right. So after lunch, Jeremy Chapman testified. He is an Indiana State Police assistant administrator and AV technician. He is the guy who enhanced the video using some programs. He found 3 frames, as I mentioned earlier, he could enhance. He found one audio clip that he enhanced. That was the only one he enhanced, was a male voice at the end. And I did wonder why, because there were other statements by a female voice. And it was a young sounding, very high pitched female voice, which is why I thought maybe it was more Abby than Libby, but it could have been both of them. And also Libby may have been focused on trying to get this on film. One of the things we heard about her, I think from her grandmother, was that she had watched a show where there was a female detective or someone who was helping the police solve crimes, and she wanted to do that. And ironically, she did. She did, or at least she did her best. We'll put it, whether she's managed or the ISP have managed, she sure did. She sure did her best. He believes the words that are said are guys down the hill. There was an objection. The prosecutor asked him, what do you believe the male is saying? 100% objectionable, I think. I couldn't believe that was allowed. The objection was unduly suggestive. And yeah. And also it's the province of the jury to decide what he says. But he gave his opinion, guys down the hill. One of the things they've been talking about in the trial was girls down the hill. And no one had heard that before. And this witness said guys down the hill. Okay, the enhanced images are changed, he said, and he did take some sounds out in order to enhance it. Background noise and so forth, he filtered out. The next witness, Riley Voorhees, lived in Delphi in 2017. She was a 10th grader, and she was in the park the day that Abby and Libby were abducted. They were younger. They were 8th graders, but, roughly friends of hers on social media, for example. They knew of each other. And she personally went every day to the trails. That particular day, she went with 2 of her sisters and Brianna Wilson. They saw a person. She remembered the person that day when they were almost to Freedom Bridge. So will this one do it for us? Yeah, well, okay. So see Freedom Bridge to the far left there? That's one end of the park. And then the park runs from Freedom Bridge to your right there, both on the north and south sides of that creek. And it kind of runs along there. There are trails. And then there's right in the middle, the Monon High Bridge, where the trail can cross to the other side. So the girls were that day, the girls who were taking a walk started at the Freedom Bridge, and they were almost back to it for the day. They had left home around 11:30, and they were almost back to Freedom Bridge, when they saw somebody who didn't say hi back, glared at me, and seemed not to be a happy person. This witness, found it unsettling, and she said to your friends, he seems to be unhappy. And she said her friends didn't seem to notice him. She was the only one who noticed him. The person she saw was suspicious or stood out because he was overdressed for the weather. His face was covered. He was wearing a hat, and he was Caucasian. He had a mask over the tip of his nose, not covering his eyes, and a hat and a heavy coat with a hood, and his hands in his pockets. She admitted she had seen the bridge guy image. It was widely distributed, and that she realized as soon as she saw it, she said that it was the man she saw on the trail. Now, the cross-examination, wow, I'll just kind of take you through it. The witness said she had to be home by 2:30. She had to be at her friend Bree. So she was at her friend Bree's house, dropping Bree off by 2:20, so she could be home by 2:30. So that meant she would have gotten to the opening there at the end of Freedom Bridge, right where the trail ends there, at about 2:15 p.m., she said. So the man had to have been there before that. And whether he was leaving or not, that may be debated. He was this is what she said in her statements. He was in all black. She said he seemed dark, maybe because of his unhappy behavior. She told Steve Mullins, law enforcement, one of the lead investigators, Steve Mullen, that the man was wearing a black hoodie, pants, a mask, and a face covered by black cloth. And the defense pointed out that she could only see the man from here to here. So that's not exactly a great way to identify somebody when all you can see of them is that much, just upper part of the nose and the eyebrows and the eyes. So in 2017, she gave a statement to law enforcement, and the defense went through this, in which she said the person she had seen, the man, was in his early 20s or 30s, was a bigger build, was muscular, and had dirty blonde hair sticking out of the hoodie that was curly. That is kind of, if you were to put Richard Allen on one end of the spectrum and that person just described on the other end of the spectrum, they are way miles apart. He is very small, about 5'5", his lawyer said. He's small, not muscular. He has dark hair, although right now he's totally shaved. At the time, he had a beard, and according to the next statement that she made, he had curly hair, brown eyes, a wrinkly face, and a square jaw. Then in a 2021 statement, she talked about different things. She even stated she thinks her memory has been affected by what she has seen. It was, I tell you, it was so inconsistent, her testimony. It just really didn't make a lot of sense. She said she saw the bridge guy at 2:15, the person she believes is bridge guy, but who is a young person with curly blonde hair sticking out of a hoodie, who's muscular and of a bigger build. So she says she saw him at 2:15, and maybe she should, let's see, she's not one who photographed. This was a really interesting point. Remember that Libby photographs or videos Richard Allen. If it's Richard Allen, she videos bridge guy. I should put it that way. I think it was at 2:13. Meanwhile, at 2:15 on the other end of the park, these girls are seeing this person they say is bridge guy. So the times don't match on that. And though it was a little odd to me, they didn't lean into that and say, well, this was absolutely Richard Allen. Don't you think this is exactly who you saw? Because then they have him at 2:15 and he's on the other side of the park when the video is being made by Libby. And I have to double check my time. I think that's what it was 2:13. She asked the question about 2:13. The witness's explanation was, well, she'd just never been asked to estimate stuff before. She was young, that she saw a bridge guy in the media and she was certain it was the man she had seen, that the pictures, she admitted the picture she saw might have influenced her memory, but now she is positive the man she saw was bridge guy? And the defense just said, okay, you say bridge guy, right? And she said, yeah. And they said, okay. And they showed a picture of bridge guy. He's wearing a lighter jacket, not light, but like light blue maybe, and jeans. And they said, you said he was wearing black jeans, a black jacket, a black hat, and a black mask. And none of those are on bridge guy. So that was the way the cross-examination went. The next witness, Brianna Wilbur, also there that day with the first witness, Voorhees, and it's talked about at 12:43 taking a picture of the high bridge, and then at 1:26 on their way back taking a picture next to one of the benches. More signposting of the time frame when they were in the park. That someone caught her attention on the way out. It was a warmer day, but this person was wearing too many layers and a deer jacket. I'm not sure what that is. And the way he was walking caught her attention. He was walking with a purpose. Everyone says hi to each other, hi back, but this guy didn't and gave her weird vibes. She told law enforcement, however, that the guy had something covering his nose and mouth, had his head down. You couldn't see his hair. Was he maybe wearing a cap, blue or black jacket, and blue pants? So it was really different stories. The cross-examination said, well, was by Baldwin, a lot of fun to watch him do a cross-examination. And he said, the guy creeped you out, right? Shows a picture of BG. And you stood as high as his upper forearm. Isn't that what you told law enforcement? She said, well, I just guessed at it. He said, well, you would say he was a taller guy, right? And she had to kind of at least admit that much. And you told law enforcement he was muscular in the August 2020 statement. She said, yeah, and a younger guy. She said, well, I'm not sure. Well, did you tell? And so it went like that. And she says, well, I was just 16. She said, well, but did you see a guy who was 20 and brown and curly hair? And she didn't recall. The bottom line is, if she only came up to the guy's upper forearm, then that was a really tall fellow. I mean, that guy had to have been very tall. The next witness, Betsy Blair, said she had seen a man on the bridge and she saw two girls, Abby and Libby. She found out they were later. She didn't know them at the time. At least I don't think she knew either of them. She may have known Libby. I don't think so, though. Okay, she saw an image of rich guy from the image from Libby's phone and said, I recognized him as the guy I saw on the bridge. She saw him 50 feet away, and he looked at me like he was expecting somebody or something. And I felt like he wasn't looking for me, so I turned around. That's relevant because the defense has made a suggestion that, and they haven't fully fleshed it out, but one of the arguments I think they would have made about third-party culprit is that if only they've been allowed to fully present this evidence, and they will make at least a proffer of it, that they believe the girls were meeting someone at the park and maybe that person abducted them. They, at this point, she said she'd already mentioned sketch once in the direct examination, and now she was asked, they asked you to identify the person, and it was hard, right? This is her first mention. And the prosecution asked that, and she said, yeah, they asked me to do a sketch. Huge issue for both sides, because the prosecution has gotten the judge to rule out the sketches that were made by an artist. The defense asked for that. They wanted one sketch in. They didn't want both primary sketches. And in fact, there ultimately were 4 different sketches, all of which looked, in my view, wildly different. None of them looked exactly the same. So on cross-examination, she stepped into that again, the sketch issue. The cross-examination asked, well, you recognized he was in his 20s or 30s, right? And had brown, poofy hair. And that you said he was more boyish looking and beautiful in appearance. He was of average height. He didn't seem short. He had no facial hair. Didn't see a hat on him. So you can see these are just all contradictory with each other, and they're contradictory with Richard Allen. The prosecution is trying to make all of these into one person, Richard Allen. None of these descriptions seem to fit Richard Allen, and they don't even match with each other. So that's going to be a serious challenge. She said and this was where I think they may have just opened the door wide to those sketches. When I said he was younger, this person I was describing, I was comparing 2 sketches. So she offered that on defense, and she'd already mentioned it during the direct. So I don't know. asked the judge to let it in. They had a sidebar. I mean, we couldn't hear, but you could tell what it was. And then after the jury left for the day, they said to the judge, well, we need to raise that issue of the sketches. Clearly, the judge had ruled against them, said no sketches are coming in, and they wanted to argue it. And then I think they said they would just file something in writing. And so we'll get a brief or something like that will be filed. So there were several juror questions. What was your distance to the man on the bridge? 50 feet. In that distance, how could you determine he was looking for someone? Great question, right? Really good. And the witness had a pretty good answer. She said his posture, how he was standing, he was facing upstream. The next question, you stated the man had poofy hair. Could you have mistaken a hat for hair? So somebody looking to connect bridge guy with a hat to this poofy hair description. And she said, yes, she might have mistaken that. There was some quick testimony then from Steve Mullen, who has already been on the stand once, one of the lead investigators, about reviewing video from the Hoosier Harvest store on February 14th. So what they did was, when they were trying to figure out where the girls were, and shortly after they found them, they pulled this video from the Hoosier Harvest store, which is right across from an entrance to the park. And they watched cars go back and forth along a road that runs along the side of the park. So they found numerous people who matched with their descriptions, or they were able to pinpoint time. So for example, he talked about finding Betsy Blair's vehicle, Kelsey German's, that's Libby's sister who dropped her off at the park. So that pinpointed when the girls arrived at the park, and Sarah Carbaugh. So we'll put all of that into our timeline, which will be coming someday soon, as soon as I have time to get that. Well, all right, we'll do a very few questions. I am worn out, so I'm headed to bed. Allison, thank you so much. Anyone who's ever been attacked wishes they could have filmed their attackers, I'll say. And it is so true. Everyone wishes they had a friendship like Abby's and Libby's. I will tell you what, one of the things I loved the most was the testimony that Abby didn't have a cell phone. Libby did. Well, Abby wanted a cell phone. She was in 8th grade, and her mother testified that she was going to get one when she got to high school. But for now, no cell phone. So Libby put both of their fingerprints. Abby could use her phone anytime. Her fingerprint opened Libby's phone. I loved that. Loved that. Tom 23. Thank you so much, Tom 23, for the super sticker. Paulie 1984. How does the prosecution explain the phone coming back on at 4:30 a.m.? There is no explanation yet. I feel sure we'll get something, but for right now, no answer yet. QuickBooks Online Tips and Tricks is a new member. Thank you. Wes Jackson. Thank you so much, Wes. And Sharon, thank you very much. Clever nickname. I'll be there Saturday. Line sit. Yes, I am going to. I've gotten a few people writing me. I'm so busy. I don't even have time to write you back. Also, I don't have my phone all day, but I am going to ask for some help doing line sitting, because I'm not going to be able to continue this. And I would like to cover the trial as much as possible. I'm going to have to make some adjustments. I don't know exactly what, but I'm going to do something. So yes, clever nickname. Write me on my Gmail, which you'll find under, if you go to the Lawyer Lee page on YouTube, you can find under I forget if it's under About or Community, somewhere in there you can find that information. LA Mac, thank you. I appreciate that. And it's been an honor to cover it, but also one of the harder things I've ever done. I've never experienced so much physical involvement in doing something connected to the law. It's not this much. Thank you, Glenn F. It does need eyes on it. I totally agree with you. And thank you, Nell T. Y'all are overwhelming me, and I'm so appreciative. Simcha, thank you. Kara B, thank you very much, Kara. And Tiger and Michael. Yes, I did see that. And Laura, thank you. I do need to get some rest. All right, we'll come over and answer a few questions, and then I have some more people to thank after that. So let's check out what some of the questions are. And let's see. Oh, I totally forgot. Put your question marks at the front, and that gives me a much better chance of finding them. So please put them in the front. All right, and many of you already knew that, so I'm grateful for that. Thank you. All right. I'm not going to go way back. I'm just going to start right here, wherever I find the next one. You hope I haven't eaten. I just wanted to say thank you. Oh, well, thank you. I appreciate it. And let's see. Diane is asking if there's a retrial or appeal. Do you think it will be made public? Thank you for all you're doing. So, the decisions around the publicity and the way the trial has been conducted have been made by the judge. So unless the judge changes, I would imagine that the next trial would have many of the same characteristics, unless there's a specific request from the appellate court to change something about it, and either an order or just comments made so that the judge feels it has to be changed. The other option would be that the judge could be removed, but 3 times the Supreme Court has refused to do that, and it's really, really hard to get a judge removed. I would think that would be very difficult, and the Supreme Court has made it clear it will be difficult. All right, let's see who else. Maria, could the hair be transfer evidence? I think what they're looking at is the root of the hair itself may have DNA, but it's probably going to match a female relative of Libby, so it doesn't seem like it's all that significant. Like it's going to change anything for the defense. Laura, how do the attorneys decide who to line up as witnesses? Does the prosecution put on the strongest part of their case first? That is such an interesting question, Laura, and that really depends on what they have to prove. One of the things you have to do is lay a foundation for evidence. So you can't just come in the first day and have somebody come up and say, okay, so there was DNA, then it matched to so-and-so. Well, DNA of what? What are you talking about? So first, you have to find the hair. Then you have to collect the hair. And then you have to show the chain of custody of the hair. Sometimes that's all one witness, and sometimes it takes more than one. Then you have to have the DNA tested, and that's when you'll be able to give finally the answer. So there are foundations that you have to lay before you can go ahead and put some of this information into evidence. So that confines you to some degree. What they clearly have decided to do is start with just the facts. What happened to Abby and Libby, and taking you through their day, how their bodies were found, the finding of the video. They're doing it very methodically, very slowly, marching through the facts of the case. We are not anywhere near really Richard Allen yet. We haven't really found out anything about Richard Allen's connection. We've had a lot of talk about Bridge Guy, but nothing that says Bridge Guy is Richard Allen. We've had a lot of talk about unspent casing, but nothing yet to say unspent casing connects to Richard Allen. That's the kind of thing that we're waiting for. And that is just a decision made by the prosecutor. They just decide whenever. And Ellis, are you surprised by the lack of hard evidence? I am surprised. There's plenty of evidence in the sense that there is a lot of information from the crime scene, but the connection to Richard Allen isn't really strong. But obviously, we really have to hear those confessions. Are they as unhinged? Was he as mentally unstable as he thought? We will just find out. So Jennifer, where was the L&L? Was it somewhere else? I don't know what the L&L is. I'm sorry. I can't answer that. Pug and Spice, do you think RA will take the stand? Under no circumstances will he take the stand. Not only is that generally something that people advise against, but I'm still not convinced that he is all that mentally recovered yet. So I just think it would be disastrous if he were to attempt to do that. Wine Woman Napa, thank you for the super sticker. Let me head back over, and there may be some questions in there as well. So let me make sure that I get everybody. Okay, so Laura, thank you. I appreciate that. I can't remember exactly where I was. Let's see. I think I thanked KS, but if not, thank you, KS. And Chuck, thank you. And Alexis is a new member. No one, thank you. I appreciate it very much. CBC, Wine Woman Napa, thank you. I better get these up quick while I'm talking. And Penny Deal, I appreciate all of you very, very much. B Campo, super sticker, thank you, B Campo. And Laura and Eminem, y'all are overwhelming. Thank you so much. I really do appreciate it. So let's answer just a couple more questions, and then I am out of here until tomorrow. Let's see what else. Don't forget. Oh, there we go. Betsy Sue. Why is access to this specific case so restricted? It relates to the decisions the court has made. At the beginning, one of the first things I talked about, and you'll have to scroll back if you're coming into the live late, is that in the front of the courtroom are these two things sitting on either side of this raised bench. And then there's one in the courtroom, and they have black trash bags wrapped on them. I was, what is that? I'd heard from somebody, what are those black trash bags? And I was puzzling over that and asked somebody in the courtroom. It turns out they're TVs or cameras. They're cameras. So this could be televised, but the judge has decided it's not. And the judge has decided there's no overflow room with video projection into the overflow room. There's no audio that's going to be released to the public as the trial progresses, or video with audio that would be released. Nothing is going to be released. So at this point, it's just very locked down. It's very difficult to get in. A lot of seats have been allotted, as they should be, to media, which doesn't include YouTube, and to the families, both sides. So those seats are taken, and then there's just not a lot left over. So it's difficult to get in. Beyond Fire, do you think Bridge Guy is a killer or just a rando? I am I always try to maintain neutrality until we get to the end of the case. So I'm going to try to do that again here. And I don't know the answer. Certainly it looks bad. We'll put it that way. Beth Bow asks, when transparency is critical, can the American citizen complain somewhere? There are certain individual things that you can complain about. For example, you can complain about maybe the release of the audio recordings, anything that there's a statutory right to. Most of this will just be reserved for appeal around the evidence that's kept out. But a lot of this stuff isn't really anything. I mean, assigning only 24 seats to the public and refusing to put rules around it. Well, there's nothing really to appeal on that. There's nobody who has oversight of that. That's just a choice being made. All right, let's see. Patty Broomfield, after seeing the video, do you think it looks like Richard Allen? You see, when it's not slowed down, you see less of Richard Allen than you did in the clip that the government had given out earlier, that the state had passed out. There was nothing extra in it that suggested it was Richard Allen. It's the same videotape we saw before. And you just really can't tell. There are stories around here that everybody in the entire, 40-mile radius, they would put Bridge Guy up, and when it was a still shot, and they would put a picture of somebody else up, and they were person after person after person was compared to Bridge Guy, and everybody thought, well, this could be the guy, my neighbor, my friend, my brother-in-law, whatever, could be Bridge Guy. And that was that he apparently had characteristics that people thought looked like anybody and everybody. So I don't think there's enough for me to be able to say for sure that that's Richard Allen. I can't tell you. At the time, one other thing, he did have facial hair. So that isn't ruled out with Bridge Guy, but is ruled out by some of the descriptions by the witnesses that the person didn't have facial hair. All right. So Evan Maurer, do you believe Bridge Guy got close to Allie in the video? You mentioned you heard a girl with a high-pitched voice squeal. Yeah, it was more like a whimper, like almost a cry. And right before she says, whatever those words were about, there's no way for me there's no path for me to go down. So how close would you say the suspect got? Honestly, you can't tell anything about it. And you can't really hear what he says. They enhanced it. Otherwise, you would have no idea. You can hear what I'm guessing is Abby, but nothing else. And the part where supposedly Abby says there's a gun, or someone does, I don't hear that. Maybe it was just a rumor. It wasn't anything that ever came out in court documents that I heard. Evan Marr, do you believe, same question. Can the FBI agents initially involved in the case be called? Yes, I think they could be if they're under subpoena. Beth Hammer, do you find the local people helpful or unfriendly to the YouTubers? Well, I think for the most part, people have been unbelievably kind and nice. And I've seen that sort of uniformly among the people. Among some people, I think there's some resentment of the YouTubers and the idea that they've come in from the outside. But I think there's also recognition that this is an important case. And I think a lot of people here want eyes on it, and they definitely want it explained. They want someone to come in and say, here's what's happening. And who has time to go and sit in a trial all day for a month? And so if someone with a law degree will do that for you and give you their analysis at the end of the day, what they think is happening, I think a lot of people do appreciate that. I've been overwhelmed by how kind people have been, really just how nice locals have been. Unbelievably great. And it is a pretty area, just beautiful place. So that's my opinion. Doberfloof. Wow, that's a great name. Why does everybody put all their chairs, coats, pillows, and such used while waiting in line? Where? Well, where do you put all that stuff? So, well, there are many things that aren't allowed, so you can't bring them. You can't bring stuff that you otherwise would maybe want to have with you. You have to be careful to only bring things that the court allows. All right. Retha Bell, please subscribe Richard Allen and wife as you've observed them. And the answer is they're not right together. So there's not a lot you can see about their interaction. She sits a couple of rows back. She a beautiful woman, very pretty woman. And Richard Allen, is a lot of times I can't see him at all based on depending on where I'm sitting. He's a bunch of people between Richard Allen and me. He sits shoulder to shoulder with one of the prosecutors all the time. They moved the two tables really tight together because they need some room to move around on the side near the jury. So, I mean, he's sitting right there next to the prosecutor prosecuting him. It's a really strange affair. And then behind him sit a couple of guards. So that's how they've made it safe. And he's right there at the counsel table. Always neat and presentable. Will his voice be heard in court on audio? Yes, Mary, I believe so. During the confessions, we are going to have some recordings of his conversations with his wife and mother from the jail. So I do think we're going to actually see that. Julie Melvin. Yes, I do know Julie Melvin, and she has a great daughter and her daughter's boyfriend or son-in-law. And I've enjoyed talking to Julie. There have been an amazing number of people. I mean, I have lists and lists of just these people were all nice to me. It just goes on and on. People have been really nice, and definitely Julie is included. All right, so let's see. How can the defense not be able to produce evidence? I think it was a mistake. I do feel like they should have been allowed to present some, at least, of the third-party culprit evidence, and I feel like it was too broad to just say, nothing, you don't get anything. All right. Some quick thanks. Vivi, super sticker. Thank you so much. Teresa the Troll would like to see Libby get a posthumous honorary doctorate in forensics. Wouldn't that be awesome? That would be so awesome. I'm overwhelmed by that girl. Cara B and Raspberry Beret Vintage are both new members. Welcome. We are glad to have you join us. And thank you very much, Spence, for the fun for people to stand in line for you. Yes, we need that group. We have got to have that group because I won't be able to keep it up at this pace. And I want to, I want to continue to cover this. I think it's important and I want to be able to get that information to you. But honestly, no one could sustain this with just, 2 hours of sleep on a night. It's just not even possible. And the cold is killing me. I am not from around here. We'll put it there. My blood is much thinner. Let's see. SR in the chat says they live 30 minutes away and are willing to line sit for me starting at midnight. That's awesome. That's fantastic. So SR just needs to communicate with me, and I'm asking because I'm at the end of what I can do and I need some help. And so I don't know how else to get it. So I would really appreciate that very much. Well, I will see y'all tomorrow night. I'm trying really hard to go right at 7. so that we can keep to our schedule. But I can't always do it just because sometimes by the time I get home from court, depending on how late we go and I get my notes all ready so I can talk to you, it may take a little bit longer, but I'm aiming for 7, and I will see you soon. I will see you tomorrow night at 7.